What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today, sorry about the echo, my offices are a work in progress. I really hope it's not that annoying. I'm working on it, guys. I'm working on it. But today we are going to be discussing disturbing alien abductions. So when we discuss extraterrestrials and people being abducted by them, we really run the gamut with experiences. Every single experience, despite being very similar to so many others, is uniquely different in some or many ways than anyone else's. To me, it's all terrifying, and it's the absolute scariest thing I could ever imagine happening to me. And that's really saying something, not only with what I do for a living, but just who I am as a person and everything I've been through in my life. I tend to be more of a believer than a skeptic when it comes to most things, especially things like abduction, where people are often hurt and traumatized. Traumatized, yes, but especially when it comes to people who have claimed to have been abducted because of the whole extraterrestrial aspect. I'm about to present to you guys some alien abduction stories that I think are extremely believable and even credible, more so than most. So I'm not going to include like the Travis Walton abduction because I already did a video on that. Betty and Barney Hill, I'm doing a video on them, and I'm going to go further with more information on a couple of these. So let's just get to it. Here's what I have for you today. On September 1st, 1969, more than a few residents of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, each individually reported seeing a UFO. The authorities were at a complete loss not only for words, but for what to do about the situation. See, normally these reports are so easily dismissible, right? The authorities could just say one lone person is sleep deprived, high, drunk, or just making false reports for the hell of it. I mean, there are so many other things the police and investigators could say is going on if it's just one person. As I previously said, though, it was definitely not only one person. Something unreal and definitely eerie happened here. So on this night, what happened was there were several residents who spotted lights above Sheffield in the southern regions of the Berkshires. The witnesses claimed that these odd lights seemed to be fitted to an unidentified disc-shaped craft. So allegedly, this craft was making some pretty amazing and never before seen maneuvers, which should have been impossible given our laws of physics, but there it was in the sky. Some of them even said that they stared at the craft and watched it for so long they thought they lost some time, or at the very least, lost track of some of it. One of these witnesses was a 9-year-old boy named Thomas Reed. Young Thomas was in the car with his mom, his brother, and his grandmother when everyone saw a group of orbs, glowing extremely bright, come darting out of some nearby trees on the side of the road. This is what Thomas himself later reported. Quote, "It came to a stop off the right side of the road. Everything got really calm. It was just like being in the middle of a hurricane. There was like a barometric change in pressure. It was just like a dead silence. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs and it got really loud, and that was it." End quote. Now, that may have been it as far as what they remembered, because suddenly as they were sitting there in the car, they all realized that they were missing 2 hours. It had seemingly passed in a moment and was gone. Even weirder, Thomas's mother and grandmother were each sitting in the other one's seat. So the mother was driving, the grandmother was in the passenger, but after all this happened, the grandmother was in the driver's seat and the mother was in the passenger seat. And it was like the blink of an eye. He said that after some time, the family were able to regain a few of the memories of what had happened to them during that time, the lost time. They all remember being in some facility that Thomas likened to a hangar, and they weren't the only ones there either. He stated, quote, "We encountered something. It was definitely not of this world. This hangar thing we were in was huge. It was larger than a football field. This hallway we had seen was circular with a Y configuration almost to control the flow of traffic. This one room had a bowed-in wall that was rounded," end quote. Now keep in mind here that in this video I'm doing a list, so I'm trying to keep the encounters short and sweet. But the ones I haven't covered already, I will definitely be giving them each their own individual video eventually down the line if you guys give me the thumbs up. This young boy and his family were just a few of dozens of witnesses who came forward reporting sightings that night of the exact same thing. And from what I can tell so far, I'll be doing more of a deep dive on this very soon. They aren't the only ones who have had abduction experiences or repressed memories that came front and center at a later date at all. Thomas Reed also said that there were at least 30 or 40 other children at his school in the 4th grade alone who came forward and had sketches drawn describing what they had seen. He said of these sketches by the other children, quote, They hung underneath in the class board in Sheffield Center School. More than one of these hangs in Roswell Museum today. People don't realize the significance of this, and it wasn't just us, end quote. On October 11th, 1973, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing in the Mississippi on the banks of the Pascagoula River. Calvin had seen blue lights ashore being reflected in the water in front of them, and at first thought it was the police there to tell the men they couldn't fish there for whatever reason and they had to leave. He thought nothing more of it. He later recalled, quote, "A big light came out of the clouds. It was a blinding light. It was hard to tell with the light so bright, but it looked like it was shaped like a football. I would say, just estimating, it was about 80 feet. It made very little sound. It was just a hissing noise," end quote. He then claimed that these three creatures without legs began to somehow float out of their vessel and towards he and Charles. He described them further as having claws shaped like mittens, with one being gray in color and having no neck, and another one somehow seeming to be more feminine in some way. Naturally, Calvin and Charles were both terrified, but strangely, when one of these bizarre creatures reached out and wrapped its weird mitten-like claws around his neck, all of his fear instantly subsided. He said he believed he and his friend were somehow injected with something unknown, which made them calm and cooperative, or as he put it, quote, "I was kind of numb and just went along with the program," end quote. Calvin Parker also alleged that he and Charles Hickson were taken aboard this strange alien ship thing and unfortunately experimented on. They found themselves right back at the same spot they had been fishing from before, noticing the lights in the vessel. So all of a sudden, they're back in their fishing spot. Almost as though nothing at all had ever happened in the first place. They knew something did happen though and drove to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and spoke to Captain Glenn Ryder and Sheriff Fred Diamond. They relayed the entire story to the two officers, with Charles telling them, quote, "When I got there, they had me," end quote. Hickson told the police, quote, "There were no seats, no chain. They just moved me around. I couldn't resist them. I just floated. I felt no sensation. I felt no pain. They kept me in that position a little while. Then they'd raise me back up," end quote. He also claimed that a machine he said looked like a gigantic eye looked over his entire body, while numerous monopedal beings, each 5 foot tall in height, surrounded him. Captain Ryder definitely did not believe anything the two men were telling him and decided to leave them alone in the interrogation room with a secret recording device. He was hoping, I guess, to capture the men further conspiring on how to keep some charade going, as he really believed that, for whatever reason, they were trying to pull the officers' legs and making the whole thing up. Perhaps the captain and the sheriff each thought the fishermen were drunk on drugs or some mix of the two. However, what they caught the two men saying on the secret recording device shocked them and made them more willing at least to go and investigate what they were claiming. Here is just a small quote from a larger excerpt from that recording. Charles said to Calvin, quote, "Jesus Christ, God have mercy. I thought I'd been through enough hell on this earth, and now I've got to go through something like this. But they could have, I guess they could have harmed us, son. They had us. They could have done anything to us," end quote. Calvin responded with, quote, "I just want to cry right now. What's so damn bad about it is that nobody is going to believe us," end quote. Upon further investigation, there was no evidence ever found one way or another as to what had happened, if anything, to these two men. What the authorities captured on the secret recording that night is really all there was, and while nothing tangible, the captain and sheriff thought it lent a lot to their credibility. Still in all, the case is a skeptic's dream, as there is physically nothing at all to prove what happened to them. After Charles Hickson died in 2011, after staying quiet about the incident for decades, Calvin Parker finally wrote a book in 2018 about what had happened that night to the two men. The publishing of this book prompted quite a few others to come along and tell their own tales about what they had seen that very same night all those years ago. And guess what? A lot of what these new witnesses had to say was very similar to what Calvin and Charles had been saying all along. They weren't alone, or so it seems, depending on what you believe. At the very least, people were coming forward saying they too had seen a UFO that night in the Pascagoula area. After the book was released and these other reports came to light, Calvin said, quote, "It makes me feel pretty good. I'm not the only one who saw something. Most of these people are credible people," end quote. This next one is very strange, guys, and that's saying something considering the topic for this video here. In Venezuela in 1954, 2 teenage boys claimed they had found a UFO in the woods, and when they approached it, they were attacked and barely escaped with their lives. The boys said that they had to literally fight off these bizarre-looking and very small, hairy aliens. In 1957, a journalist from Brazil named Jairo Martins covered the boy's story and also asked others who may have had an experience with extraterrestrials or UFOs to send in to him their own stories so that he can publish it in his paper. That's when a farmer named Antonio Villas Boas contacted him and explained what he had experienced. He was a farmer in the area when the first encounter happened and was at first reluctant to tell his story. Antonio was 23 in 57, and Martins paid for not only his travel expenses, but also put him up in a hotel room so he can get him to Rio de Janeiro, where he would be interviewing him and have him checked out by physicians. Antonio said, somewhat conveniently, depending on what you believe here, that the very next day after reading Martin's report on what had happened to the teenage boys years earlier, he too had had his own experience with extraterrestrials and a UFO craft. So what he's saying, what Boas is saying, is that he read the story, and then all of the sudden, out of nowhere, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, guys, because I do believe this more than I don't, he suddenly saw a UFO himself and was like, oh, now I can contact Martins and move from there. Antonio said that in order to avoid the mostly sweltering daytime temperatures, he was working nights on his parents' farm instead. On October 16, 1957, he claimed he saw what he thought to be and what looked to him like a quote-unquote red star above the fields near his home. He claimed that as the craft approached him, he could see that it was egg-shaped, and the top of it had a cupola which contained a rotating red light. Cupola, C-U-P-O-L-A? Don't know. The ship extended 3 legs and landed on them right there in the field. This is when Antonio says he tried to run, but was almost immediately captured by beings in overalls who were approximately 5 foot tall and wearing helmets. The creatures took him aboard their craft, and he described the beings as speaking in animalistic sounds and grunts with tiny, beady, little bright blue eyes. This is terrifying. They then proceeded to take blood from his chin, of all places, and then enclosed him in a room with some kind of gas or something in it, which made him feel severely sick to his stomach. Not too long after this, a very attractive and completely naked human quote-unquote, entered the same enclosed space. She had red pubic hair and long blonde hair on her head, and then the two quickly engaged in sexual intercourse multiple times. Almost immediately after they had had sex, the woman gestured to her stomach and then motioned to the sky, which Antonio was somehow able to take these 2 small gestures to mean that she was not only pregnant with his child, but that she would be raising it in the sky / aboard a craft. She just went like this. And that's what he gathered from that. Like, he knew it to be true. So maybe it was something telepathic. I don't know. Antonio said he was extremely pissed at having been used in this way, or as he put it, quote, was rather angry about being treated like a good stallion by the beings, end quote. He was then taken back down to his farm where he was originally taken from, and as he watched, the vessel took off back into the sky. He realized he had been gone for 4 whole hours. While he didn't say how long it felt like to him exactly, he did let it be known that he thought he had been gone for a much shorter period of time than he actually was. Martins took Antonio to see a doctor so he could be examined for any signs that he had in fact been taken and experimented upon. While the doctor and the reporter believed that he was fabricating the story, neither one of them had any kind of explanation as to why he exhibited signs of radiation poisoning and sickness. He had extreme nausea that would come and go, as well as bruising all over his body, burning eyes, and skin that hurt when it was simply gently touched. Mr. Boas later became a very well-known and successful attorney, and in his spare time he managed to put together models of the UFOs he claimed he had been abducted by. A man named Walter Buehler from the Brazilian ufology group SBED interviewed him in 1962 and even published his story. There is still no tangible evidence as to whether or not, one way or another, this actually happened to Antonio Boas. Many still believe that this was a fabricated story and that Antonio Boas saw the ad in the paper of Martins asking for people to come forward with encounters, and he saw an opportunity to get a free trip and to stay in Rio while also getting medical attention, which was, for the most part, and from what I understand, rare back then for a farmer such as himself, and concocted and fabricated this entire bizarre tale. Antonio Boas died in 1991, and there are people who are vehement on both sides, both that it did happen and that it did not. Either way, it's a strange one and is still being told in both the UFO communities and by skeptics alike. On October 21st, 1978, a 20-year-old Australian pilot named Frederick Valentich seemingly disappeared into thin air. He was aboard his Cessna 182L during a 125 nautical mile training flight over the Bass Strait between Tasmania and the Australian mainland when whatever happened happened. Frederick was not only an experienced pilot, but, and I feel this is important to mention here, he was also an aficionado of alien abduction stories and ufology in general. On this particular night, while flying at approximately 4,550 feet at around 7:06 p.m. after leaving Moorabbin to reach King Island, he reported over his radio that an unknown and unidentifiable craft was following him. Melbourne Flight Service reported back to him and assured him that there was absolutely no flight traffic anywhere near him, like none in his entire vicinity. Valentich remained adamant that a very large unknown aircraft was following behind him and that he couldn't shake or evade whatever it was. He described it saying it had 4 bright lights and at a remarkable speed, all of a sudden had shifted above him approximately 1,000 more feet. Valentich remained in contact with Melbourne and for an entire 5 minutes described every single detail of everything that was happening and what he saw. He described its exterior as being shiny and metallic looking and reported every single move it made. All of a sudden, too, he seemed to be having trouble with his engine. Melbourne asked him to describe the vessel to them again in detail. His response would turn out to be his final words. They were pretty eerie. Quote, "It is hovering and it's not an aircraft," end quote. Officials reported the last sound they heard coming from Frederick's radio was, quote, "a metallic scraping sound," end quote. Everyone, including authorities, had just assumed he had crashed somehow and proceeded looking to uncover the remains of the Cessna at least. A search of the area he was last known to be flying through was searched and came up empty of any clues at all as to what might have happened to the young and very experienced, I might remind you, pilot. The Australian Department of Transport got involved and launched their own official search, but they too came up empty-handed. That was all there was in this particular case until 2014, when new information came to light. There was an action group in Victoria, Australia that came forward and alleged that a farmer, and this farmer was unnamed and is still unknown to this day, unfortunately, who was tending his fields that same fateful night when Frederick disappeared, and he was claiming to have seen a 90-foot-tall UFO hovering directly above him while he was on his farm. This thing was right above his head in the sky. The leader of this particular UFO action group, whose name is George Simpson, says he is extremely frustrated by the lack of information about the farmer or any credible evidence that he even exists at all. He stated, quote, "It's easy for some to dismiss, but there are corroborating stories confirming there was a UFO near Adelaide that night." He stated, quote, "It's easy for some to dismiss, but there are corroborating stories confirming there was a UFO near Adelaide at that time. This was an experienced pilot who should have been able to identify another aircraft, but was clearly unable to do so," end quote. So, what happened to Frederick Valentich that day so long ago? There are still no firm answers or tangible, credible evidence. Some theories which have been put forth are that he simply crashed, he disappeared on purpose, or that he was abducted by some sort of entity, alien or otherwise, and we either can't yet conceive of it or just don't want to. Without evidence, it's hard to make any kind of determination on any of this or on anything really. So let me know what you think of these cases in the comments below. That's all I have for you today, guys. Again, I'm sorry about the echo. Getting things together, it's a slow going process, but I promise you at the end of it, it's going to be so much better, just the quality of the content. So this is just for now. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and spread the love by sharing this video. If you haven't already, please go on over to my other channel, MoonBearOracle. It's a startup channel. It's very slow going, but again, so many great things coming on that channel as well. If you would like a personal intuitive oracle reading with me, please email me at moonbearoracle@gmail.com. MoonBearOracle, all one word, @gmail.com. If you have any encounters with the supernatural, paranormal, extraterrestrial, whatever, and you want me to make it a part of my listener encounter series, please email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. On Saturday and Sunday nights, you can catch me on Spaced Out Radio on the After Hours show from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Time with Big Willie Townsend and John Hudson. Just all aboard the Woo train over there. On Wednesday nights, right here on Gemma Jade from 7:15 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, you can find me doing a one-card pull for an intuitive oracle reading for first come, first serve basis for anyone who comes in and wants one. Come get a one-card pull for a weekly reading. Guys, in the description box, you will find links to the After Hours show in case you haven't seen it, a link to my Wednesday night show in case you haven't seen it and want to check it out. You will also find links on how to donate to the channel. Become a patron. A $20 or more donation gets you a once a month intuitive oracle reading from me. PayPal, Cash App, and Amazon wishlist gift link. Thank you to everyone who donates, gets personals, does sessions, and who just supports me in general. I love you guys. I have a few new subscribers. I just want to welcome you guys to the channel. I have several different offices and places where I film. It's just kind of my life right now, but I try my best to give you the best content I possibly can and hope that you will stick by me and be patient as I sort out everything that I'm doing. I love and appreciate you guys so, so very much. If you'd like a copy of my book, Missing the Fae Theory by Gemma Jade, I will put the Amazon link for the Kindle and the paperback edition in the description box as well. If you would like an autographed copy, please email me at GemmaJadeParanormal before making the purchase. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Also, remember to be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.